Now next we move over to the structure of a C program. We already saw in the last session that C is a structured language. It has a starting, ending and a body. So now let us see what is the main concept behind writing a C program. Every C program contains a number of building blocks we called functions. We used the term module in the last session to describe the word function. So I said that a problem in C can be handled by dividing the problem into smaller subtasks, solving that specific task and then putting it together to get the entire solution. So that is the concept of this function or module. It is one or more statements or a small set of statements that perform one particular subtask of the entire problem. And when you put it together in an organized manner, that forms the entire C program, and when you run it, it gives you the desired result. So the another name for a function is a module. So a C program is nothing but a collection of different modules or different functions which collectively solve the problem that we want to address. Now this is the structure of a C program. It has these many sections in it. You have a global declaration section, a header file section, you have the main, which is the most important function in C, you have a declaration part, an execution part and the user defined functions, and in all these three parts you have something called statements. Now we will see each of these in detail. When you consider the global declaration function, it is, as we all know, something that is globally available to all parts of the C program. So variables, we have already seen what are variables in the last class. Variables which are used in more than one function in a C program. Normally we use variable so that we can assign some value to it. And since C is a collection of functions, every function will have its own variables which will not be visible to the other functions in the program. So the global declaration of variables allows that single variable to be made visible and available to all the functions in the C program. So generally by default every variable is not global unless you specifically declare it to be global. So when a variable is to be used in more than one function, it is called a global variable, and this must be declared outside all the functions. If you declare some variable inside a function, it is called a local variable. Only when you declare it outside all functions, it can be visible to all the functions, accessible to all the functions, and it is called a global variable. Next we have this header file section. Now what is a header file? As we all know, a header file is something that gives the heading of a document. So every C program begins with this header files. Header files contain the function definition. For example, if you see in C, we have all the data types which are permissible, we have the elements, the identifiers, the white spaces. So all these symbols which are permissible in C have been defined in these header files. Every header file has an extension which is a must when you define a header file. So every header file should have that .h extension. They have a predefined format which cannot be changed, and this is the way you declare a header file. You have to give hash, which is nothing but a delimiter, include, which is nothing but a keyword, then you have to give the less than symbol, within that you have to give the name of the header file, .h extension, give a greater than symbol. So this is the normal way we use a header file, or you can use the double quote symbol instead of the less than and greater than symbol. So either of these two formats you have to use when you declare a header files, without which compilers will never run your program, because without a header file, a C program will not know what are the data types permissible in C, what are the symbols permissible in C. It will not have access to any definition. So the presence of the header file indicates to the compiler that you have to look into these particular files to know what are the symbols, what are the rules for framing statements in a C program. So function prototypes and definitions are included in such header files which are to be used in the program. For example, stdio.h stands for standard input output. So the printf and scanf statements are nothing but they are used in C to display the result and to accept data input from the user. Each of these statements has a definite format. So, unless the compiler knows what is the format for these two statements, it cannot say whether your program is having an error or not. So, where will it look for to see the correct format? It will look into the stdio.h header file. So, to tell the compiler that the definitions of the printf and scanf statements are present in the header file stdio.h, we have to include these header files in the program. So, if you forget to include these header files, the compiler will not know where it has to look for, and it will not be able to find out the definitions for those statements. So, it will simply say your program is having this error, your program is having this error, even though your program will not have any error. You might have been completely correct, but your compiler will not know how to execute your program. That is the importance of these header files. Without a header file, there can never be a C program. Next, we move over to this function main. Every C program must contain a main function. It is a starting point of the program. The execution of the program, the compiler always begins execution with this main function only. Now, in this main function, you may have other sub functions or you may not have functions. If the main is there, that itself forms a C program. Whether you declare other functions or not is up to your problem. It is up to the way you want to solve it. But without a main function, there can never be a C program. And program execution always starts with the opening and closing braces. After every main function, you have this opening brace, and then only the set of statements will follow. So, the compiler will check for the main function and an opening brace, only then it will begin checking whether your program is correct or not. Otherwise, the compiler will not know where to start the program execution. It can identify the main function only as the starting point of your program. Next, you have the declaration part. The declaration is where all the variables that are used in the program will be declared. That is, when we have to find out the volume of a rectangle or the area of a square, we need some values, isn't it? So, we have to declare variables to assign those values. Initialization of variables is when we assign some value to a variable. Say if you say side of a square, you have to say whether it is 10 centimeters or 20 meters or whatever it is. So, the value has to be given to the variable, that is called initialization. And initialization means, as I said, providing initial values to variables. So, all these are done in the declaration part of a C program. The executable part is where you actually perform the execution. If you have to find out the area, you have to do a square, and if you have to find out the volume, you have to do length into breadth into height. So, the actual processing is done in these set of statements, and we should always remember that this execution part should come only after the declaration part. If it comes before, the C program will not be able to identify whether the variables are correct or not. And processing can be done either in a single statement or a set of statements, that depends upon our problem. If it is a small solution, one statement is enough. If it is a big one, you need more than one set of statements, and they should always be enclosed between the opening and closing braces, as we have seen in the function main. Now, here comes the user defined functions, which, as I said, depends upon the user. According to his problem, he can define his functions. It is optional, mostly defined only after the main function. In certain cases, it may be defined even earlier, but normally the structure of the program, the functions come only after the main. So, this is optional. If you want, you can define it before the main function, but that will make it more difficult for you when you have to go through the program and correct the errors. These comments are used in the C program. This is also highly optional, they are not necessary. Our comments are normally inserted by the programmer, because one person will write the program, another person may try to make corrections in the program. So, in that case, if he knows the comments that are inserted by the programmer, it will be easier for the third person to understand what the programmer has actually done. So, they are useful for documentation, so that even after maybe say 2 or 3 years, if you are going to see the same program, you may not remember at that time for what reason you wrote that program. But if you have these notes close to the statements, you will be able to identify, oh, for this reason this program was written. So, whether this program is applicable to my current problem. So, all these solutions you can derive quite easily. It is easier to understand the flow of the program. Comments are of 3 types. You have a single comment, you have nested comments, that is one comment inside another, and you have multi-line comments. That is, if you are going to comment only a single line documentation you are going to give, you can just start it and end it the way I have shown it. you have to give a / followed by a asterisk symbol, and at the end of that comment you have to give an asterisk symbol and close it with a /. If it is a multiple line comment, right at the end you have to complete it.